Hi everyone, welcome to Her Hidden Heart. Thank you for supporting my stories.
My grandmother looked at my parents with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, something colder, something final. She spoke 5 words that made both of them go completely white. The guitar was already hers. Then she turned to me and added something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. And it was not worth $71,000, sweetheart. It was worth over $400,000. They did not just take your inheritance. They committed a felony. My father opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. My mother grabbed the kitchen counter like she might fall over. And I stood there in my grandmother's living room, realizing that the people who raised me were strangers. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Liliana Donaldson. I am 29 years old and I work as an archivist at a university library in Vermont. My job is to organize historical documents, preserve old manuscripts, and make sure that important things do not get lost or forgotten. The irony of that will become clear very soon. It was a Tuesday when my world fell apart. A completely ordinary Tuesday. I was eating lunch at my desk, a turkey sandwich, and an apple, cataloging some 19th century shipping records. My phone rang, and I saw my mother's name on the screen. I almost did not answer. We talked maybe once a month, and it was usually her telling me about my sister's children or complaining about her garden. But I picked up, and my mother, in that cheerful voice she uses when she is showing off, started telling me about my sister Priscilla's kitchen renovation. You would not believe how beautiful it looks, she said. Viking range, marble countertops, custom cabinets. Your father got a great price for that old guitar, $71,000. Can you believe it? Priscilla is absolutely thrilled. I felt the sandwich turn to cement in my stomach. What guitar? I asked, even though I already knew, even though my hands were already starting to shake. The one at Grandma's house, she said, like it was nothing. Like she was talking about an old lamp or a broken chair. Priscilla needed the kitchen done before Thanksgiving, and you know how contractors are. Your father handled everything. My mother has this remarkable ability to deliver devastating news in the same tone she would use to describe a casserole recipe. It is honestly impressive in the worst possible way. That guitar was not just an instrument. It was history. It was legacy. It was the only thing that ever made me feel like I mattered in my family. My grandmother, Vivian Aldridge, was a session musician in Nashville during the 1960s and 70s. She played on records that went gold and platinum. She sat in studios with legends. And one night, after a recording session that went until 3 a.m, a producer handed her a guitar and said she had earned it. A 1959 Gibson Les Paul Standard in cherry sunburst finish, one of approximately 300 made that year. The kind of instrument that museums fight over. The kind of guitar that collectors would sell their houses to own. On my 18th birthday, my grandmother sat me down in her living room and told me that guitar was mine. Legally yours now, she said. I want you to have it. I was 18. I thought she meant someday, when she was gone, when I was older. I did not understand that she meant right then, that very day, that she had already signed papers making it official. The guitar stayed at her house because I lived in tiny apartments with roommates who left dishes in the sink and lost their keys constantly. It seemed safer there. I would visit and sometimes just sit with it, running my fingers over the case. I was saving it, going to learn to play someday. Turns out, someday came and went while I was busy organizing 18th century shipping manifests. Here is what you need to understand about my family. I have an older sister named Priscilla. She is 34, married to a man named Gerald, and has 2 children. She is what my mother calls the successful one. Priscilla's wedding was a lavish ceremony at a country club. My parents took out a loan to pay for it. My wedding was a backyard barbecue that my mother called intimate and meaningful, which is what you say when you do not want to spend money. Priscilla's children have college funds that my parents started the day they were born. When I was applying to universities, my mother told me that scholarships exist for a reason. I used to think I was the independent one, the daughter who did not need help. Now I understand I was just the one they did not feel like helping. When my mother finished bragging about Priscilla's kitchen, I asked her one question. Did Grandma agree to this? There was a pause, just a half-second hesitation. Your father handled the paperwork, she said. I am sure everything was fine. That hesitation told me everything. I told her I had to go. I hung up the phone. I left my sandwich sitting on my desk and walked out of the library without telling anyone. I got in my car and drove 45 minutes to my grandmother's house, hoping the whole way that this was some kind of misunderstanding. But I knew it was not. Somewhere deep in my chest, I already knew. When I pulled into her driveway, I sat in the car for a full minute, just breathing. My grandmother was 78 years old. She had trusted her son completely. And if I was right about what happened, I was about to break her heart. I walked up to her front door and knocked. She opened it with a smile that faded the moment she saw my face. Sweetheart, she said, what is wrong? Everything, I wanted to say. Everything is wrong. But instead, I just asked her one simple question. Grandma, where is your guitar? Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read everything, and your support means the world to me. My grandmother's face went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, then concern, then something that looked almost like fear. Richard took it 3 weeks ago, she said slowly, for appraisal. He wanted to get it properly insured. She paused, and her voice got quieter. He said it was for you, Liliana. He told me you had been worried about it sitting here unprotected. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My father had used my name. He had made my grandmother believe she was helping me while he robbed us both. I never said that, I told her. Grandma, I never asked him to do anything. Her hand went to her chest. She stepped back from the doorway and sat down heavily on the couch behind her. I followed her inside and closed the door, watching the color drain from her face. He said he had a buyer lined up, she whispered, a collector who specialized in vintage instruments. He said you would get the money. He said you needed it for your student loans. I paid off my student loans 2 years ago. My father knew that. He had been at the dinner where I announced it, where my mother said, that is nice, and immediately changed the subject to Priscilla's children. I called my father right there, standing in my grandmother's living room. I put him on speakerphone so she could hear. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding annoyed. I was in a meeting, Lily. What is it? I need to ask you about Grandma's guitar, I said, keeping my voice steady. His tone shifted immediately, smoother, more careful. Oh, that. Yes, Mom signed an authorization. Everything was completely legitimate. The money went right into Priscilla's account for the kitchen, just like we discussed. I had never discussed anything with him. But that was not the part that made my grandmother's jaw drop. You told me the money was for Liliana, she said, loud enough for him to hear. There was silence on the line. Then my father laughed. That awkward, forced laugh people use when they are caught in a lie. Mom, you must have misremembered. We talked about this. You signed the papers. I looked at my grandmother. She was shaking her head slowly. I never signed anything authorizing a sale, she said. Richard, I trusted you. More silence. Then my father's voice went cold. I have the document right here. Your signature is on it. I do not know what kind of game you two are playing, but I handled this properly. Talk to my lawyer if you have a problem. He hung up. My grandmother stared at the phone in my hand like it was a snake. That smooth, confident denial, that casual dismissal of her memory, that complete lack of guilt. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I never signed anything, Liliana. I swear to you, I thought he was helping and I believed her. My father had lied so easily, so smoothly that I knew this was not his first time. People do not get that good at deception overnight. That evening, my sister Priscilla posted photos in our family group chat. Her new kitchen gleamed under professional lighting. Viking range with 6 burners, marble countertops with gray veining, custom white cabinets with brass handles. Finally, she wrote with 3 heart emojis. Thank you, Mom and Dad. The comments rolled in from aunts and cousins. Gorgeous. So jealous. You deserve it, sweetie. I stared at my phone screen until it went dark. Nobody mentioned where the money came from. Maybe they did not know. Maybe they did not want to know. I almost convinced myself to let it go. I spent my whole life being the reasonable one, the one who did not make waves, the one who understood that some people need more and some people need less. And I was always somehow in the second category. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Grandma really did sign something and forgot. She was 78 after all. Memory gets fuzzy. I had gotten so good at gaslighting myself that I almost did it again. But the next morning I went back to my grandmother's house. She had not slept. I could see it in her face. She had been thinking all night. I keep going over it, she told me. Richard came on a Tuesday morning. He had papers with him, but he said they were just for the appraiser. Technical descriptions, insurance forms. He pointed where to sign. I did not read them carefully because her voice broke. Because he is my son. I trusted him. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Then her expression changed, harder, clearer. But I never authorized a sale, she said, and I have been remembering other things. She told me about the jewelry. 3 years ago, my father had offered to take some of her pieces to be cleaned, a diamond brooch that belonged to her mother, a vintage watch from the 1940s, a pearl necklace she wore on her wedding day. They never came back. She had asked him about them twice. The first time, he said the jeweler was backed up. The second time, he said she must have already picked them up and forgotten. I thought I was losing my mind, she said. I went to a doctor. I was terrified I had dementia. I cried for weeks thinking I could not trust my own memory anymore. She looked at me and I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. My grandmother had survived the music industry in the 1960s. She had held her own in rooms full of men who wanted to take credit for her work. She was not a fragile old woman. She was furious. Turns out I was not losing my memory, she said. I was losing my belongings, and my son was letting me believe I was going crazy, so I would not ask questions. She stood up slowly, walked to the hook by the door, and grabbed her car keys. Where are we going? I asked. The bank, she said. There is a safe deposit box with your name on it. I should have shown you years ago, but I kept hoping I was wrong about him. She opened the front door and looked back at me. I was not wrong. The bank was a small brick building in the center of town. My grandmother had been a customer there for over 40 years. The manager greeted her by name and led us to the vault without asking questions. The safe deposit box was in both our names. I did not even know I was on it. Grandma pulled out a manila folder thick with documents and handed it to me. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. Open it, she said. The first document changed everything. It was a notarized gift deed dated August 15, 2014, my 18th birthday. In clear legal language, it transferred full ownership of the 1959 Gibson Les Paul Standard, serial number 94721, from Vivian Aldridge to Liliana Donaldson. There were witness signatures. There was a notary stamp. It was completely, unquestionably legitimate. I told you it was yours, my grandmother said quietly. I meant legally yours. That day, I stared at the document in my hands. I thought you meant eventually, I said, when you were, I know. She nodded slowly. I should have explained it better. I should have given you a copy, but I hoped it would never matter. I hoped I was wrong about your father. She took a breath. I started seeing problems years ago. Small things. Money I lent him that disappeared. Family items that went missing. Little lies that did not quite add up. He is my son. I love him. But I have not trusted him in a very long time. She had done this secretly. Used her own attorney, not the family lawyer. Kept the document in a safe deposit box my father did not have access to. Never told anyone. She had been protecting me for 11 years. Protecting the guitar, waiting for exactly this kind of betrayal. Your grandmother was basically running a counterintelligence operation from her kitchen table. I had clearly underestimated her. There was a second document in the folder, a professional appraisal from 2018. A specialist in vintage instruments had examined the guitar, verified its authenticity, and assessed its value, $385,000. I read the number 3 times. Then I read it again. That was 7 years ago, my grandmother said. Prices have gone up since then. I checked recent sales last year. Guitars like yours are selling for over $400,000 now. My father had sold it for $71,000. Either he was catastrophically ignorant about what he was stealing, or the buyer had taken advantage of his desperation. Probably both. When we got back to my apartment, I started researching. The buyer was a dealer in Boston called Morrison Fine Instruments. Their website was sleek and professional. They specialized in rare vintage guitars, and their tagline made my stomach turn. "We find value others miss." I searched their current inventory, and there it was, my guitar, my grandmother's guitar. Posted with professional photographs and detailed provenance, $449,000. They knew exactly what they had bought for $71,000. They were planning to make nearly $400,000 in profit. But that was not the worst part. I kept digging. I remembered something my father had mentioned at Thanksgiving last year. He had been getting some old things appraised. I had not paid attention at the time. Why would I? My father was always talking about schemes and deals that never went anywhere. 2 weeks later, I was at my parents' house for my nephew's birthday party. While everyone was in the backyard watching the kids, I slipped into the kitchen and opened the junk drawer. Every family has one. The drawer full of batteries and rubber bands and old takeout menus and business cards. Morrison Fine Instruments. Theodore Morrison, proprietor. On the back, handwritten in blue ink, Richard, call me about the Gibson anytime. Ted. This was not a random sale. My father had been planning this. The dealer had been waiting. I took a photo of the card and put it back exactly where I found it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and did what I do best. I built a timeline. I organized evidence. I documented everything. My father knew about the dealer for at least a year. He took the guitar from my grandmother under false pretenses, claiming it was for appraisal and insurance. He forged her signature on an authorization to sell, and he sold property that had legally belonged to me for 11 years. This was not a family disagreement. This was not a misunderstanding. This was theft. This was forgery. This was fraud. I called my grandmother and told her what I had found. There was a long silence on the phone. I could hear her breathing, processing, deciding. When your grandfather was dying, she finally said, "He made me promise to take care of Richard. He worried our son was weak, easily tempted. I have spent 40 years keeping that promise, making excuses, cleaning up messes, telling myself it was not as bad as it looked." Her voice hardened. "But he stole from you. My granddaughter, using my name, making me think I was losing my mind. I am done protecting him." She gave me a phone number. Caroline Webb, she said. "She is an attorney in Burlington. She specializes in fraud and estate disputes. She is expensive, but she wins. Grandma, I cannot afford." "I can," she said. "This is exactly what I save my money for. Protecting my family. My real family." My grandmother had the kind of savings account that only happens when you live through the 1970s without developing expensive habits. All those years of saying no thank you to rock star parties had finally paid off. The next morning, I called Caroline Webb and made an appointment. The guitar was legally mine. The evidence was clear. And for the first time in my life, I was not going to be reasonable. I was going to get justice. Caroline Webb's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in downtown Burlington. No fancy reception area, no leather couches or abstract art. Just a woman in her late 50s behind a cluttered desk, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, looking at me like she was trying to decide if I was worth her time. I handed her the folder, the gift deed, the appraisal, the photos of the business card, the timeline I had built. She read everything twice without saying a word. Then she looked up at me and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoys winning. "This is one of the cleaner cases I have seen in years," she said. "Clear ownership transfer, documented forgery, provable damages, and a paper trail leading right to the buyer. Your father made this remarkably easy." She explained my options. There were 2 paths forward, and I could take both at the same time. The criminal path meant filing a police report, grand larceny, which in Vermont means theft of property over a certain value, forgery, which is a felony regardless of amount, potentially elder financial exploitation, since my father had manipulated my 78-year-old grandmother into signing documents under false pretenses. The civil path meant suing for return of my property and damages, the difference between what my father sold the guitar for and what it was actually worth, plus legal fees, plus compensation for emotional distress. Caroline leaned back in her chair. I want you to understand something, she said. If we go forward with the criminal complaint, your father is facing prison time. Real prison, not probation, not community service. Years behind bars. She waited for me to react. I did not. I understand, I said. She nodded slowly. Good. Then let us talk about evidence. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what I do best, gathering documents, building a case. My archivist training had prepared me for exactly this moment, and I did not even know it. I obtained a copy of the forged authorization letter. My father, in his arrogance, had kept a copy in his filing cabinet at home. He was proud of his paperwork. He showed it to my mother, who mentioned it to my grandmother, who asked to see it. He handed it over without hesitation, never imagining she would photograph it and send it to me. Caroline brought in a forensic document examiner, a specialist who analyzes handwriting for court cases. He compared my grandmother's real signature, from her driver's license and bank documents to the signature on the authorization. The differences were obvious once you knew what to look for. Pressure patterns, letter formations, the way certain loops connected. The expert's conclusion was definitive. This signature was not written by Vivian Aldridge. We also obtained my grandmother's phone records. They showed calls from my father in the days before he took the guitar. Short calls, the kind where you confirm details and make sure someone will be home. And then there was the business card, the handwritten note from Theodore Morrison. Richard, call me about the Gibson anytime. Proof that this was not an impulsive decision. Proof that my father had been planning this for at least a year. But the investigation turned up something else. Something that made everything worse. Remember the jewelry my grandmother thought she had lost? The diamond brooch, the vintage watch, the pearl necklace? Caroline's investigator found records of similar items sold to an antique dealer in New Hampshire 3 years ago. The seller's name was Richard Donaldson. $35,000. Gone. And my grandmother had spent months believing she was developing dementia. When I told her, she did not cry. She just sat very still for a long time. He let me think I was losing my mind, she finally said, his own mother, so I would not ask questions. That was the moment I knew there would be no reconciliation, no family therapy, no path back to normal. My father had not just stolen from us. He had deliberately tortured his own mother to cover his tracks. I have $17,000 in my savings account. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. Years of packing lunches and skipping vacations and saying no to things I wanted. Meanwhile, my sister's brand new kitchen had cost $68,000 of stolen money. I had spent my whole life being responsible, and my parents had spent 30 seconds deciding I did not deserve what was mine. Caroline prepared 3 demand letters. The first went to Morrison Fine Instruments. Return the guitar immediately or face litigation for receiving stolen property. We know the seller did not have legal authority. We have documentation. Your choice is to cooperate or be named in a lawsuit that will become public record. The second went to my father, $350,000 in damages, representing the difference between the sale price and the guitar's actual value. Respond within 10 days or face civil and criminal proceedings. The third went to both my parents jointly. Notice that all evidence has been compiled and will be submitted to law enforcement if no settlement is reached. No phone calls, no family meetings, no tearful confrontations, just paper. Just law, just consequences. I watched the FedEx tracking like it was the most important document I had ever handled. I work with historical records. I have held letters from the Revolutionary War. I have processed Civil War correspondence and 19th century love letters. None of them made my hands shake like watching that delivery confirmation appear on my screen. Delivered. Signed for. All 3. Now I waited. For 2 days, my phone stayed silent. I went to work. I ate lunch at my desk. I cataloged manuscripts and answered emails and pretended everything was normal. On day 3, my phone started ringing, and it did not stop. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, please take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really helps me keep making these stories for you, and your support means everything. Now let us see what happens next. The dealer folded first. 2 days after receiving Caroline's letter, Morrison Fine Instruments responded through their attorney. They would return the guitar immediately. No litigation necessary. They would also provide complete documentation of the sale, including all communications with my father. They did not want publicity. A vintage instrument dealer's reputation is everything. Word that they had purchased stolen property, even unknowingly, would destroy them in the collector community. Caroline called me with the news. They folded faster than a lawn chair in a hurricane, she said, and they are giving us everything. Everything turned out to be very useful. The communications between my father and Theodore Morrison painted a clear picture. My father had reached out first, not the dealer. He referenced the business card from a year earlier. He described the guitar and said it was a family piece we need to sell quickly. Morrison asked one question. Does your mother know? My father's response. She authorized it. Paperwork is done. The dealer offered $55,000. My father countered at $75,000. They settled at $71,000. The whole negotiation took 4 days. My father accepted a price that was less than 20% of the guitar's value because he wanted fast cash. Priscilla's contractor needed payment before starting the kitchen renovation. $68,000 for the kitchen. $3,000 that my father kept as what he probably called a handling fee, my grandmother's legacy, sold for a Viking range and some pocket money. On day 4, my father called me. First time we had spoken since that afternoon in my grandmother's living room. His voice started out controlled, almost professional. Liliana, this is family business. You are bringing lawyers into family business. This is not how we handle things. I kept my voice steady. You stole my property, I said. That makes it legal business. He tried anger. After everything we have done for you, after all the sacrifices your mother and I made, I asked him a simple question. What exactly have you done for me? Silence. He tried bargaining. We can work this out, pay you back over time. Just call off the lawyers and we can settle this like a family. With what money? You do not have $400,000. More silence. Then he tried guilt, the weapon that had always worked before. Your grandmother is 78 years old, he said. Her heart cannot take this kind of stress. Is that what you want? To put your grandmother in the hospital? Grandma is the one who hired the attorney, I said. The longest silence yet. Then he hung up without another word. Caroline filed the police report the next day. All the evidence, the forged signature, the expert analysis, the communications with the dealer, the pattern of theft going back years. A detective was assigned to the case. She requested an interview with my father. Not an arrest, not yet, just an interview. My father hired an attorney, not a good one. He could not afford good. The attorney's advice was to cooperate, answer questions, and look remorseful. During the interview, my father tried to minimize everything. Family misunderstanding, he said. My mother is elderly. She gets confused. My daughter is emotional. The detective was not impressed. Family misunderstandings do not involve forged signatures, she said. That was when my father realized this was not going away. This was not something he could talk his way out of. This was not a situation where being charming and confident would save him. 3 days later, my mother called. She was crying. She always cried when she wanted something. How could you do this to your father? She said. How could you tear this family apart? I asked her the obvious question. How could he do this to me? She had an answer ready. It was for Priscilla. She needed that kitchen. She has children, Liliana. She has a family to take care of. And what do I have? She did not answer. You were always so independent, she finally said. So self-sufficient. We did not think you would mind. And there it was, the truth, exposed without her even realizing what she had admitted. They did not think I would mind being robbed. They did not think I would notice. They did not think I mattered enough to consider. I minded, I said, and then I hung up. The last call came from my sister. Priscilla's voice was different than I expected. Not angry, not defensive, shaken. Liliana, I need you to know something. Mom and Dad told me Grandma agreed to sell the guitar. They said she wanted to help with the kitchen. They said it was her idea. I know, I said. I never would have accepted the money if I knew. She trailed off. Are you going to sue me? Her voice cracked. Am I part of this? You received the money. I said. You benefited from the theft. I did not know it was stolen. That is for the lawyers to sort out. Long silence. This is going to destroy Mom and Dad, she said. They destroyed themselves, I told her. I am just the one who finally noticed. 6 weeks after I sent the letters, the guitar came home. A bonded courier delivered it to my apartment. Same case, same instrument, undamaged. I opened the case and looked at it for a long time. Cherry sunburst finish, worn in all the right places, 50-plus years of music history in lacquered wood and steel strings. It looked different now. Not because it had changed, because I had. It was never about the money, but it was never just about the guitar either. It was about being seen, being valued, being believed. I closed the case and called my grandmother. It is home, I said. She started to cry, but this time I knew they were the right kind of tears. The legal process took 4 months from start to finish. My father's attorney reviewed the evidence and gave him advice he did not want to hear. A trial meant public record, media attention, guaranteed conviction. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged signature, the documented communications, the pattern of previous thefts. A plea deal meant some control, reduced charges, potentially shorter sentence. My father chose the plea deal, not because he was sorry, because he was calculating, even now. He stood before a judge in a Vermont courthouse and pleaded guilty to 2 felony charges. Grand larceny for the theft of property valued at over $100,000. Forgery for the falsified authorization. The judge was not sympathetic. This was not a moment of weakness, she said. This was a calculated theft from your own daughter, facilitated by manipulating your elderly mother. The court finds no mitigating circumstances. Richard Donaldson, 2.5 years in prison, 5 years probation after release, felony record permanent. He would not be able to vote. He would not be able to own firearms. Most professional jobs would be closed to him forever. He did not look at me when the sentence was read. He did not look at anyone. My mother pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, accessory after the fact, reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor. She had known about the sale. She had helped cover it up. She had repeated my father's lies when my grandmother asked questions. Her sentence was 3 years probation and 200 hours of community service. No prison time, but she was jointly liable for the financial restitution. The court ordered them to pay $350,000, the difference between what they sold my guitar for and what it was actually worth. They did not have $350,000. Nobody thought they did, but they had assets. Their retirement accounts, $165,000 in a 401k they had been building for 30 years, seized. Their home equity, the house they had lived in for 25 years, now mortgaged to its maximum value, $180,000. Total recovered, $345,000. The remaining $5,000 would